Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Diana Rusu. I am the Innovation and Knowledge Management for We Empower program here at UNUMAN. I would like to say a big hello to everyone today. We Empower community, WEBS community, our networks around the world, friends. Thank you for being with us. We understand it's not the normal time. We appreciate your collaboration and we appreciate that you are here today despite everything. We hope you and your families are okay and safe, and most importantly, are well. Today, we will try to respond to some questions that we received in the last weeks around COVID-19 and private sector behavior. And we hope we will bring the responses that you were looking for. And we are very happy to have a distinguished panelist today that will come with the best research that are done in the latest weeks, and with some recommendation based on the work they are doing. We are very happy today to have also a group of private sector representatives joining and attending the online session. So if you would like to interact and if you would like to share the questions via audio or via chat or via Q&A box, please do so, and we will do our best to do this section an interactive one, to have as many questions and answers as possible. Without any further ado, let's start the session, and we hope it will be a useful one and engaging for us and for you. To open the session and to deliver some opening remarks and to set us up for this webinar, I would like to invite Liz Pat, Deputy Head, Foreign Policy Instruments, Regional Team for the Americas EU Delegation in Brazil. Liz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. Could you please confirm you can hear me well? Very good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are around the globe. I understand that we have participants from the chat that are joining from various countries. I would like to thank you, the We Empower team, for coordinating such a valuable webinar. And I would like to already thank warmly Emily and Sarah, who are the panelists today, for their insights of such a challenging topic. Welcome on behalf of the European Union to all participants to this online event. My name is Liz Paté and I'm working for the European Union. And more precisely, I am representing the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments that are the operationally, financially implementing the EU's foreign policy. The foreign policy instruments support actions of the women, peace and security agenda, but also allow for the EU to cooperate with partners around the world to inter alia tackle global challenges and gender equality in particular. Obviously, the situation of today is unprecedented, and I will not enter here the details of the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on gender equality on the private sector, but would like to briefly state that concretely, to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, the foreign policy instruments of the EU reoriented a series of ongoing actions and activities, as well as ensured new actions, very often implemented in partnership with UN agencies, that supports the most vulnerable groups, women and girls in the first place. For instance, thanks to one of the instruments we have in our toolbox of the foreign policy instruments, we have the instrument contributing to stability and peace, and we are focusing on a series of new actions on conflict areas with specific girls at risk of victim of sexual and gender-based violence. And the instrument EU are partnering in G7 countries. We empower in Asia, and a program that we call Win-Win Gender Equality means good business in Latin America and the Caribbean, and all together allow. And the event of today is financed by the EU and is part of the We Empower G7 project program. At the beginning of the crisis, it has decided to actually use and they are with the private sector networks, whether directly with enterprises, directly with businesswomen, etc. And together to develop concrete tools, gender analysis, data, and expertise for a gender-sensitive business response. Engagement from the business is not retracted during the COVID-19 crisis. This is what we do with the Women Empowerment Principles, the WEPS signatories network, for instance. Also, in partnerships with UN Women and ILO under We Empower, we're working on matchmaking and creating market opportunities for women to maintain their businesses. Gender lens investment was at the core of the program we have initially designed under the We Empower, and now we are working and exploring ways to continue to adequately answer this challenge under the new circumstances. Obviously, I cannot cover here all what is being planned and implemented in these days as an immediate or medium-term response, but would like to highlight that this is and has to be supported by a strong communication campaign of all stakeholders. Therefore, we count on the support of those who are ready to associate to make sure that concrete tools are widely known. Gender is mainstreamed throughout the EU action in general terms, within the EU and in external action. And in that respect, women and girls are more than ever at the heart of our action. We are committed to continue to work with the private sector directly, as we're doing today, to make sure that together we manage to create tools and act for businesswomen, women and girls, and gender equality. I wish you all a very fruitful webinar, and I thank you very much, giving you back the floor.
Thank you so much, Liz. We are happy to have here today stakeholders from Italy, UK, I see Spain, I see private sector representatives and governmental sector representatives from G7 in EU and beyond. So hopefully today we'll be able to share this experience, tools and good practices that we are implementing under the We Empower program, under the Win-Win and We Empower Asia, and hear what our peers and colleagues in the organizations are doing so we can exchange and learn from each other. As mentioned by Liz, and we also have today two distinguished panelists that will share their expertise with us. We have Emily Dickens, the GD Corporate Secretary and Chief of Staff of Society for Human Resources Management. Emily, thank you for being with us. And we have our colleague, Sarah Denby, Head and Stereotype Alliance Secretariat from UN Women. Sarah, thank you for being with us. We are very excited to have you here. And to kick off and to manage the conversation, I'm inviting Anna Feld, Manager, We Empower G7 Program and Head of Web Secretariat. Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you so much, Liz, for your introductory remark. And I'm Anna Feld. I'm managing one of the programs that Liz talked about, the We Empower G7. And we've been working really hard these days to figure out what is this crisis representing in terms of impact on women and girls, and how various actors can take a role in this situation and really make the most out of it, and that we are not leaving this coming out of this crisis with more women and girls left behind, and this is our ongoing efforts under the Sustainable Development Goals to make sure that women and girls are not left behind, and they are already very much so before the crisis, and the crisis we have seen is now added a lot of additional challenges. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. We fully understand the situation that, since we're talking about the private sector today, that they are finding themselves in, not only in terms of limited cash flows, but primarily about the uncertainty, not knowing how long the crisis will last and how will we come out of it, how will we face into the normal or the new normal as we talk about it. We also know that many business leaders have already been forced to take very, very tough decisions in terms of their staffing and their operations. Many of them are in essential, so-called essential business, and some are in not, and that has been a key determinant on how business has been impacted. We've learned from previous crises, and the latest one in 2008, that both quantity and quality of jobs will suffer. And we know that women are already in the most precarious jobs, and we really need to make sure that this is not the time to jeopardize decent work. We know that precarious contracts lead to mental health issues. And we already hear very much about the lurking mental health crisis, not only based on the precarious contracts, but also what we've heard about the additional burden in the household that I will talk a little bit more about in terms of juggling. And I'm sure on a personal level, you can all relate to this in juggling your job and the family responsibilities. But also the increase in domestic violence. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that from our speakers today. But we're also very concerned about the impact on global supply chains. We know from the previous crisis that whatever happens here in G7, in the North America, in Europe, will have serious and severe implications on women and girls in emerging economies. So what we do here will have ramification globally. And our response, therefore, has a very, very important role to play. Let me see if I can fast track to the first slide. So what we really would like each of you to think about is that in our response, whether long-term or short-term, that we think about the enormous pressure that is being put on the home. We are now focusing all of the different activities that have been ongoing out in society is now happening in the home. We work, many of us are working from home. School is taking place at home. Either children have their education has been canceled, it's gone online, and a lot of pressure on families to do homeschooling. Leisure is limited, but if happens at home. Same thing with care. We hear many women who have been had to cut down on if they're pregnant, on their prenatal care, if the regular health care has been limiting because people are fearing of and one, to burden the health system, but two, to expose themselves to the virus. But with this slide, I'd also like to make sure that in everything that we do, that we keep in mind an intersectional approach, that how we live the crisis, how we experience the crisis is so different depending on so many different factors. Whether you are single, it might, and you live alone, it might be solitude and loneliness that is a key factor and might impact the mental health as well. If you live in a multi-generational household or that you have responsibilities for the elderly, that has a one dimension. And for employees in your companies, they experience this differently. Whether your business is in, as I mentioned earlier, in essential or non-essential, whether you have allowed employees to work from home, or if they are currently not working at all, whether you are an entrepreneur and self-employed, or what your situation is, basically is so much different. And I think what we hear in media is a very one-track image of how life looks to people during the crisis and during the lockdown. And what we'd like to make sure is that we have that multitude of dimensions, and that we keep in mind that in our organization, not everyone lived this crisis in the same way. So what we have done from our side, and we really recommend here a multi-stakeholder approach, a people-centered approach to the response in the crisis, that we join forces with other key actors. And from our end, in our team, we've been working on different angles of and dimensions of the crisis. We've been collaborating with Sarah and her team and UNICEF on promoting positive gender roles in marketing and advertising. We've been working with ILO and UNICEF, family-friendly policies these days. We're also working with in UN Women with our Ending Violence Against Women team. And we have one that is a broad recommendation already ready, and we have in the pipeline specific targeted recommendations for the private sector. And then we have our dedicated WEP's COVID response recommendation paper that you see on the left. But all of them you can get from weps.org/resources. And again, I will hand it over to the next panelist, but I'd like to reiterate how grateful we are to the European Union for their support and for allowing us to be present in this time and really work with partners in responding to this crisis. So I will, I think we have a little exercise, Diana, before we move over to Emily. We'd like for all of you to go up on the green bar at the very, very top, and then go to annotate. There's a little pen, annotate, and under annotate, you'll find something called stamp. You can choose your stamp. It can be a cross, a tick, a star, a heart, and help us populate how your response have been in your organizations. So one, have you ensured women's equal representation in all the response planning and decision making and rollout? Have you addressed issues of paid and unpaid care, work-life balance policies, etc. during this time? And have you targeted women and girls in all efforts to respond to COVID-19 within your organizations? So we invite you to put your little stamp on each of those three, just to get a sentiment of what your organization's been up to before we hand over to Emily. So you go to the green bar at the top, you click on annotate, and from annotate you go to stamp, and then you choose your stamp. It can be, as shown already on the screen, a star. It can be a tick. We have somebody raising their hands, Diana. Maybe you could see if this is related to any technical.
We invited participants, if they would like to make a comment or if they would like to ask a question, to raise their hand. So we will take all of these questions, including from Q&A box, after both Emily and Sarah will provide their remarks.
Thank you, Diana. So maybe this means that there has been very limited response so far. Either we have a technical issue here on Zoom in understanding how this functionality works, or you haven't actually been dealing too much with these issues. So maybe we can come back to this one and everyone can explore this functionality for a later stage. So I will hand it over to Emily. Over to you, Emily.
Well, good morning. And I think just to help a little bit with what you've been trying to get everyone to do, it's actually right next to the green bar. It says view options. And that's if you use that arrow down, it'll get you all the options you need so you can participate. So good morning. It's an honor to be here. My team at SHRM is super excited. I want to thank those SHRM staff members and SHRM members who are online. Some of them have been sending me notes on our internal Slack, and others have been sending chat messages here. So I truly appreciate you joining us today, and all of you. It's an honor to see so many people from across the world who have an interest in this. And SHRM has a really big interest in this. We've been saying for some time, even before this crisis, the importance of understanding the partnership necessary to make sure that you have equality in the workplace. And here's an even better opportunity for us to share those issues, because at SHRM, and we'll go to the next slide, sorry. At SHRM, we believe that better workplaces create a better world. It's simple as that for us. And workplaces will be the cornerstone of the COVID-19 business recovery. In our role as the voice of all things work, SHRM research confirms that the post-COVID workplace will be very different. And HR professionals are positioned to shepherd employers in shaping the workplace of the future. And as workers, all of us on this call, it's our opportunity to make work better for women, families, and society. There are 5 areas, as we go into the next slide, that provide the blueprint for where we must concentrate our future workplace efforts: workplace culture, paid leave, workplace flexibility, inclusion, and pay equity. In the time that I have, I'll focus on the first 3, and hopefully we'll touch on the other 2 as well. As it relates to culture, these are the things that we talk about. Remote work and social distancing and economic stress can really wreak havoc on a company culture. You work so hard to have everyone buy into that. We just did our engagement survey at SHRM, and it was so great to see so many people who understand our culture. But now that we're all away from one another, it's more difficult to maintain it. And the team spends a lot of time each week in our executive team calls, making sure that we're engaging our employees. SHRM research shows that more than 1/3 of employers are facing difficulty in the workplace. 71% of employers said they're struggling to adjust to remote work, of employees said that they're struggling to adjust to remote work, while 65% said that maintaining employee morale has been a challenge. Next slide, please. As a baseline, employers need to communicate and show compassion and connect with their employees during this time where people feel that they're not safe, where people are scared and need support of all types. And as mentioned earlier, we need to focus not just on the economic needs, but on psychological and social needs. What hasn't changed thus far is that culture trumps compliance. We can't fix culture by implementing a new set of rules. So we must keep paying attention to what employees are experiencing in this time of stress. Bad behavior can escalate. So your culture must also include accountability. We're all adults, and employees play an equal role in maintaining the culture of an organization and calling out their peers whose behavior does not contribute to this effort. Maintaining a positive culture can preserve your talent and help your recovery. This is the time to truly bend toward your company's values, or fix what wasn't working in your culture and on your teams. Whether it's this virus, a declining stock market, or disappointing job reports, it's the role of HR to support employees during uncertain and stressful times, and it's also the role of employees to help one another as well. So strong and open workplace cultures are even more important when times are tough. When we talk about paid leave, everyone is talking about it now. I remember preparing with our government affairs team for what we focus on this year, and you couldn't tell me that paid leave would have so much attention by Congress and throughout the world. And so all of the recently created laws to help address the issues related to this virus and to help US employers are focusing on paid leave. But when they expire, and in the US, most of these policies will expire December 31st of this year, US employers are going to find that demand for modern paid leave policies is going to grow. Policies should build on existing volunteer leave systems and encourage more employers to offer paid leave. It's important, more important than ever, for employers to create a bold, innovative solution that enables them and their employees to thrive in this transforming global economy. We need paid leave policies that understand the demands of a 21st century workforce while acknowledging the unique needs of individual businesses. Paid leave is an area that can help organizations track talent. It's an area where you can show your values. Our CEO, Johnny C. Taylor Jr., has encouraged employers to voluntarily provide sick leave during the COVID-19 experience because it's the right thing to do. But this is the type of decision that shows strength of an organization's culture and its values. And once we return to work, deciding to maintain this status or find other ways to make work more flexible for employees will be important. So similar to paid leave, organizations have adopted modern workplace flexibility policies to better position them to keep business operating during disruptions like the coronavirus. Flexibility is more than remote work and telecommuting. Employers can get very creative with it, including flex time, job sharing, and like we have at SHRM, open leave. In an economic downturn, flexible work arrangements such as job sharing can alleviate layoffs and then trickle-down effects such as mortgage defaults, failing credit scores, and the inability to pay bills. Inclusion and pay equity is also going to be important. When every job posting yields hundreds of applicants, employers who have built a reputation of equity, inclusion, and positive cultures can stand apart, attracting top talent globally and serving as role models for other employers. It's a key recovery strategy. Job candidates want to be hired at a great workplace, and employers want to hire great job candidates. Compensation is a big part of this value proposition for both. My advice is always to look at the compensation package in its totality. We don't discuss this enough as women are making our way through our employment and our career, but it's not just what the base salary is. What are the other items that are being offered by the employer to make this a place where you will have true work-life integration or meet your personal and professional goals? Pay equity is just one element of inclusion, and it differs from diversity. Inclusion is the effort, diversity is the outcome. So make sure as you're thinking about creating inclusive cultures, you don't just focus on numbers, you focus on bringing in people and creating an environment where they feel included and safe, and that will encourage others to join as well. Women, we should take the opportunity to lead in all of these efforts and not just to offer areas of concern. As we come out of this downturn, we'll need to be the best of the best to be part of the workplace revival, and that includes underrepresented talent pools. We can still reap the rewards of hiring women and men with criminal backgrounds and people with disabilities, veterans and older workers, and our voices as women will be important in the workplace to make sure we're giving opportunities to all types of people. Next slide. In the coming year, SHRM will focus on supporting HR professionals to accelerate the recovery of work and workers with right-on-time solutions and resources. These include support for mental health and wellness and ongoing research on the economic impact of COVID-19 and how workplaces will change. It includes resources for working parents, and we'll also try to help and provide guidance for inclusion assistance, especially around untapped talent. We have a ton of resources, and a list of them is provided here. But I'll just say that we have so much to look forward to as we shape the new normal of work, workers, and workplaces. We intend to create environments for the future where everyone, including women, can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was really insightful. And I think we saw a lot of great comments and you inspired a lot of people to comment. And I think there were a few things that culture was an important element. And I do agree with you that culture is really now put to test. The culture that companies have built, they will show if they are actually aligning with that culture in terms of the action that they are taking in this crisis situation. We also talk about very much fixing what is not working And I think this is the time to where we are witnessing increased gender inequality, to actually bring them to surface and really make sure that the changes are sticking beyond the crisis period. And that we can see that one area that we've seen improvements is the men being at home, actually taking on more responsibilities in the care. And how do we make this stick after the crisis, that this is a behavior that we continue with in afterwards. So thank you so much, Emily. I think we'll come back to some of the questions once we heard from Sarah. So over to you, Sarah.
Great, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning in rainy New York. My name is Sarah Denby and I'm the head of the Unstereotype Alliance Secretariat at UN Women in New York. So I'm going to talk with you really quickly about the importance of private sector communications during COVID-19. I'll tell you how the Unstereotype Alliance works with the private sector to make sure those communications are a force for good. And I'll explain why the COVID-19 context is a crucial time for the private sector to promote positive gender roles in its communications. So, as we've talked about this morning, throughout COVID-19 lockdowns, we've been forced to rely on different forms of communication, whether it's to work, to connect, to entertain ourselves or homeschool our kids. Media consumption has spiked across the globe, so 36% more people are watching the news, 27% of people are watching more television, and 21% are spending much longer on social media. Web traffic to the New York Times and the Washington Post grew over 50% in the last month. So right now, we are staring at our screens all day as a means of connection, communication, entertainment and information from within our communities. So where does the private sector fit into all of this? Business leaders have always been community leaders. And we need to remember that in our communications. So whether it's internal emails to update and support staff, or advertising and email outreach to an external customer base, the private sector often provides a voice of leadership in times of uncertainty. Its influence and reach carries a great responsibility right now, and certainly it's an opportunity to lead by example. And at the Unstereotype Alliance, we know this to be true. So the Alliance is a global action platform of private sector partners who are committed to using advertising and media as a force for good. Convened by UN Women, the Alliance unites 94 multinational brands and advertising agency networks worldwide who seek to eradicate harmful gender-based stereotypes in media and advertising content. Our members know that when content is empowering, diverse and inclusive, it expands horizons of possibilities for women and men, boys and girls all over the world. Which is why we worked with UNICEF and our We Empower colleagues to develop a guidance note on promoting positive gender roles in marketing and advertising in the context of COVID-19. And you received the link to this in your invitation to this webinar. Because there's never been a more important time for the private sector to use its influence and reach as community leaders. Right now, many companies are developing socially beneficial communications for their staff and their consumers. But for any communication to be effective, the approach should always start with the audience. And right now, that audience is at home, as Anna was just talking to, or they're out working on the front line as essential service workers. But either way, if they're a woman, they are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So in a context of school and childcare closures, domestic care responsibilities for working parents, but especially women, have increased considerably. Globally, women already do 3 times as much unpaid care work as men. Women make up 70% of workers in the health and social sector worldwide. And this burden of care increases women's risk of infection from the virus. And since many countries have imposed necessary stay-at-home regulations, there has been a huge surge in domestic violence reported around the globe. That means that private sector leadership teams will likely have women on their staff and certainly across their audiences who are currently experiencing domestic abuse during COVID-19. So this makes for a challenging time to engage audiences with messages of service and support. But marketing communications have always had a unique opportunity to portray positive gender roles. They can allow women's voices to be heard and for their needs to be represented, as well as those of boys and men. So when communications depict positive gender roles, it can play a really proactive role in challenging social norms and discrimination. It can also help to balance the burden of care currently being experienced in homes around the world. It is, without doubt, an opportunity for the private sector to influence positive change in our communities. So the guidance note that we developed provides a series of considerations for when you're developing or assessing communications for the COVID context. In all types of public or internal comms, it's important to recognise that unconscious bias can lead to unintended use of harmful stereotypes, especially in a fast-moving situation where you want to be quick to market. So we've included a series of prompts to help you sense check the language, scenario and imagery that you're using to ensure that communication is progressive and constructive. I'm very happy to answer questions about that in our Q&A section. But in closing, I would just point out that emergencies can offer opportunities for heightened awareness around positive change. And I'm sure we've all seen examples of that throughout COVID-19 already. And through its communications with the public, the private sector has a chance to disrupt gender stereotypes and change traditional narratives. By including women's voices and perspectives, it can show that leadership and decision-making, household chores and caring for children can and should be shared responsibilities. And in this way, the private sector can help to advance equality for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. And thanks for leading this great work with unstereotyping, marketing, and advertising. It is, in fact, a really critical time to use those as levers for advancing gender equality and show gender roles in a very progressive manner. So thank you very much, Sarah. I think I'll hand it over to Diana. There's a number of questions and a few requests to speak. So I'll hand it over to Diana to lead on this.
Thank you so much, Anna. We received a lot of questions, so I will try to combine. Catherine is asking what solutions, recommendations the panelists can suggest to cope with remote work challenges and maintain employee morale. So Emily, maybe if you don't mind, you can start.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my video back up.
Catherine is asking what solutions and recommendations you all can suggest to cope with remote work challenges and remain, employee morale remain very good and positive during this time.
So I'll tell you, we've been working very hard. Our executive team meets every Monday, and I will say, number one, though we always talk about the importance of HR, it's important that every people manager think of unique ways to engage their team while we're working remotely. And it's also important that you acknowledge that while working remotely, it's likely you're working many more hours than you typically work. Now, I know I work a lot, I'm a workaholic. But I really know it now being at home and you're sitting at your desk for 8-10 hours and just kind of popping downstairs to get food or something like that, right? And so what we've been doing is acknowledging and telling your staff that we understand you don't need to be tied to a table, a desk, a laptop for that entire time. People have to almost be given permission to not be tied because they think since they're working remotely, they have to prove that they're working and not doing other things. We clearly understand that that is the case, that you are running your life from home and there are other things you're doing at the house. So I think as a people manager, so that means don't just depend on HR to do this. As a people manager, talk to your team about taking breaks. And that means getting out of the house, walking if you can, doing something else, logging off, alerting people you're just going to not be available for the next couple of hours, and you're just taking some time to go watch mindless TV, work on a puzzle, do a color book, do other things, take really good breaks, and also check on your mental health. Before we left, our CEO gave a great speech about the importance of not being inundated with what's on TV, what's on social media. I was one of those people that gave up social media for Lent, and it was the best thing that I had done because I wasn't bombarded with all of the negative things that were coming out on social media about the situation we're in. We all know we're in a situation. We have to try to think as positively as we can. So I would say, while working remotely, protect your mental. And take care of yourself, but also understand that you can prove your value and then the fact that you're essential to your organization in other ways. That doesn't mean being tied to your laptop for 12 hours a day. You've got to take a break so that you can really give your best to the job. And I think that's just critically important. And then also do other things. One of the things that we talked about that SHRM did is we had a full team meeting, which we typically do. So we had over 400 of our staff members throughout the world. That's in SHRM India as well as in the States. And we had our online call. Right after that call, Domino's delivered pizzas to everyone's home. It was something our CEO wanted to do. We typically have a hot lunch after we do the team meeting anyway. And so in background, the executive office team worked really hard to make sure we had addresses and got orders in, and everyone, and if you had family at home, you could order up to 2 pizzas, right? It was just critically important for us to make sure people knew that we cared about them, that we understood they were at home with their families, and to take that break afterwards to do so. So just little things like that can be helpful.
Diana, if I may come in, just to share a little bit what we do at UN Women. Emily talked briefly about it earlier, about the importance of flexible working arrangements. And we do have colleagues that work morning shifts, night shifts, depending on where their family responsibilities are. There needs to be flexibility on both the employer side and the employee side to be able to find the right working modalities. We also have in our team regular team meetups that are social, that are playing some games to kind of take that stress away and get a moment where we connect on a more kind of human level that is not work related. And I think as a team leaders, I think is important to have those moments with the team members. So to kind of de-stress. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you very much.
If I can add one more thing, I just remembered, take your time off. So I mentioned in my presentation, SHRM has open leave. It was a decision we made over a year ago to just say, if you need to take time off, just take it. You don't have to worry about counting your days. People forget while we're working remotely to take days off. And so literally after the first 20-something days at home, I just stopped and said, I'm taking 2 days. I'm literally taking open leave. I'm just going to do everything but work on those 2 days. And so don't forget, you do have leave, and to use your leave. That's going to be critically important to keep you fresh and to keep you engaged as well.
Thank you, Emily. Our participants recognize that they spend a lot of time on social media, and of course, they're also intaking the information on different areas of work and pleasure from social media as well. But this is also a time when there is an infodemic, misinformation and disinformation. So Sarah, would you like to advise all of us or guide what the strategies and tactics have been deployed to counter disinformation and misinformation during this challenging time?
It's an interesting one, and it's a constant challenge. But I do think this is where the private sector can really provide a voice of leadership. It's enormously difficult. You know, we have a number of media platform owners as members of the Unstereotype Alliance, and we've seen them discuss publicly how difficult it is to monitor streams of incorrect information, and they're working as quickly as they can to address that. But I think in terms of the private sector communicating as brands with its audiences, with communities, it is a real opportunity to demonstrate social citizenship. So I think it's really important that, you know, private sector, but particularly consumer brands, organize themselves to agree what their communication strategy is on certain topics, particularly COVID, how publicly they're going to address social situations, how they operate as a brand, how they communicate as a brand. I think what's really important to note is that, yeah, I mean, whether we make a conscious effort to shut it down for a couple of days and give ourselves a social media breather, we are spending statistically far more time than normal on social media, and it is where we're getting a lot more of our information now. And what I would say in terms of the importance of private sector assessing their communication strategies, being really careful with the messaging that they put out there, not being too hasty to go to market, sense checking their that they've unstereotyped their messaging, and that it doesn't include harmful stereotypes or assumptions that are regressive in terms of how it communicates. Because the important thing to remember is consumers are literally watching more intensively than ever before. We're all on social media. We're all discussing the messaging that is being put out there, self-moderating correctly or incorrectly. But what consumers want to see from the brands and companies that they engage with is good social citizenship. And they want authenticity, not opportunism. So we would never advocate using COVID-19 as a marketing opportunity that gets sniffed out straight away. But there are genuine and legitimate offers of services and public service announcements that are rightfully helping people at this time. But consumers want to see progressive portrayals and how brands depict and communicate with their audiences, and they adjust their spend accordingly. So progressive marketing at a time like this, almost more than any other time, is not just a social issue, it's a business imperative. And I think it's worth taking a little longer to really consider messaging, social media communications, any kind of brand communications, and determined that it's as inclusive and progressive as it can be. And then I would say that post-COVID, keep doing that too. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Sarah. In the next 10 minutes, we will try to take some questions from the audience, and I would like everyone to be short in questions and short in answers, so we can have this as many as possible in the next time. I would like to invite Vicky Smellman to comment and to share her question. Just to let everyone know that Vicky is the advisory group member of We Empower program in Canada. So Vicky, thank you for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm with the Canadian Labour Congress. I'm the National Director of Women's and Human Rights, a member of the advisory group for this, the G7 program. I just wanted to reflect on and maybe give the panelists an opportunity to reflect on the role that collective bargaining and social dialogue can play in both addressing the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 and in promoting gender equality in the recovery. I think private sector organizations that have unionized staff can really should be encouraged to work collaboratively with their bargaining agents in order to solve some of the problems that both that COVID-19 is posing, both to the essential workers who have to work and need to be safe in doing so, and those who are working remotely in trying to juggle some of the challenges that the panelists described so well. I would say too that there was some reference to workplace policies and the importance of having strong workplace policies in promoting gender equality, and that is something that unions can really assist with in helping identify some of the challenges facing women workers, and particularly the most marginalized women workers in your organizations. Gender equality isn't something that trickles down. So when you think about how to promote it, you have to think about the most sort of disadvantaged workers in, the lower wage, the precarious workers that might be within your organizations. And unions can really help solve the problems and the challenges and the barriers that those women workers face the most. I hope too that we should encourage the trade union participation not only at the workplace level, but at the level of social dialogue that that governments might be putting in place in order to develop economic recovery plans. I think that I just wanted to just reinforce that unions have an important role to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Emmy, would you like to post your question, and then we will give an opportunity to the panelists to answer to both of them? Emmy Cross.
Oh yes, good morning. How is everyone? Nice to see you, Anna. I had written some questions, so my questions are what everyone's are. Is what I'd love if I don't know if the WEPS is going to come up with a new toolkit for making sure that companies don't backslide during this time. I'm seeing a lot in my research, and Gender Fair wants to do something to sort of making some cost-effective suggestions or some after-build recovery suggestions. But I'd love to hear what the panelists are thinking about how we can make a trickle-up gender equality program. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. Sarah also has a similar question as Emmy. Sarah is asking, are there tools and checklists for companies to help them apply a gender lens to their recovery plans? So let's have this bundle of 3 questions with some answers from the panelists. Maybe Emily, would you like to start?
Sure. So I saw that question about tools to look at this recovery in the gender lens, and I actually sent a note to our research team to ask them whether they're going to poll some of our members and others about tools that they're using. But I'll also say we talk a lot about our gender lens, but again, I'm going to go back to culture. If you have a culture that has promoted inclusivity, that means you have a culture where you've been holding your managers, your people managers, accountable for making sure that their hiring is inclusive, that their promotion practices are inclusive as well. And so I think internally for every organization, we should be looking across the board. Research and data is amazing. And we tell people to annually look across the board at their promotion practices, make it part of the calendar, right? Annually, each people manager should be looking and assessing their promotional practices, how they promote people, how they hire people, how they approve leave and things of that nature, how they approve professional development opportunities. And so at this time where there's a disruption, if you've already got that practice, you now apply that practice to how you're handling people remotely, their need for additional time off. There'll be people who can't return back to the office when everyone else does because maybe their children are still out of school. Maybe they're caring for a relative that has an immune system that requires them to not be exposed in the workplace, right? And so if you're taking that same lens and you're making sure that across the board you're making decisions equitably and fairly, that there may not be a need for a separate lens if you're looking at it through a lens where there's a culture that's inclusive across the board. Now I know some might say, oh, well, that's, most people are not like that, but we've got to challenge our companies and our people managers. We've found, and you'll hear me say this term people managers a lot, your CEO, your executive team can definitely set the standard for what that organization should be doing and what the culture should be. But you have to think the people who are implementing and executing it each day are your people managers. And so it's important that you hold them accountable to make sure that they're hiring, firing, developing, and promoting in a manner that is equal to that looks like what the organization has said it is and what the culture should be there.
Thank you, Emily. Sarah?
Oh, me? I don't have any further comments to add to that. I think that was really comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, maybe you can touch upon the tools from the Women Empowerment Principal Secretariat and collective bargaining, maybe?
Yes. No, I also saw another comment, another question earlier that I also like to address. But I think from the tools and checklists, there's a lot of things happening, and I'm glad to also hear from Emily that you will see if there's something you can dig up and that we can share with all the participants. We are working from our side in UN Women to develop a survey that companies can use, and we hope that that would also help you ask the right questions, because at this time nobody has the answers. But I think that the best way we can deal with this crisis is really about asking the right questions. And so we hope that we are bringing together all our efforts of the 3 programs that you heard Lise talking about earlier in coming up with a global survey that can help you in that sense. We also have on our website, webs.org/resources, we have a lot of different guidance on different topics. As I mentioned earlier, we will have soon also on domestic violence. And so everything is in the making. Stay tuned on that website, and we will post more, and you will have more and more tools to deal with this. We are looking at it not only as an immediate response, but we know that we are in it for the long haul, and that there will be a lot of action required for quite some long time in the recovery as well. And I'd really like to emphasize this point that Emily made. This is the time to fix what is not working. So this is the time to step up and really make sure that to make those tweaks to your cultures, to really show that your organization is inclusive, we heard also Sarah talk about it. This is the time to be progressive and really show that you are here for the people in your organization. And this is just from Vicky's point also on the social dialogue. This is really key that we come together in a joint force, multi-stakeholder dialogues with the employers, the workers, and everyone is on the table to figure out what is the best solutions. And again, what are the best questions to be asked at this time? What are the issues that we are tackling with? And the question that we didn't hear was the one around procurement. And I touched slightly upon the supply chain earlier in the discussion, but this is, there are 2 ways that we can fix the procurement. We know that about 1% of women businesses are getting opportunities to supply to either the government or to the private sector. And we know that this has been very stagnant at 1% because one, the procurement officers, the buyers are sticking to their old ways of doing things, and have not maybe had enough new products to look out for. This is the time when we see a little bit of a shift. Some businesses go out of business. This is, we see new products being coming out to support this, the crisis. This is the time to start looking for women's business. And we hear a lot about women who are innovating in this space and coming up with new solutions. So this is the time to be in the lookout for women entrepreneurs in your local communities to help shift that 1% to a much, much higher percent. So I just wanted to add that. And one final point that I really liked was, this is a time to demonstrate good social citizenship. Thank you, Sarah, for adding that to the conversation. So back to you, Diana.
Thank you, Anna. I hope everyone will excuse me if we will take 2 more questions, as I promised to the participants. Dana, I am unmuting, so you can ask your question or address the comment. Let's see.
Yeah, I actually don't think I had a question. I think it might be somebody else named Dana who had a question.
Okay, good, but nice to hear you. Thank you. Lydia is asking, difficult conversations are key. As leaders, do you encourage challenging conversations and promote psychological safety so people can ask for what they need without fear? Many other questions, but maybe we can have this one. And also maybe I also see a lot of questions regarding the mental health and spiritual wellness. And What is the role of private sector? Maybe we can also think about the role for the employees, but also for the community. And any other final remarks that we would like to give and to go and implement from today onward? Maybe we can start with Sarah.
I think it's just been such valuable conversation this morning, and really interesting issues coming up in the chat space. I think we've kind of all been saying the same things, is that this is, dare I say, an unprecedented time, but it has literally made us stop in our tracks and evaluate the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we interact with each other. And we're learning more about each other and our lives than we ever had before. It's given us much greater exposure to our colleagues as human beings, really, and given us permission to have conversations that have been difficult to have in the past. They're difficult to have now, but we've been given an opportunity and a license to force those conversations, and we simply have to have them. And I do hope that we can galvanize these discussions and move forward in a stronger, more progressed way. And I think that's on all of us, but particularly the private sector as really powerful influencers has an opportunity to show real leadership in that space. So I look at it with optimism, to be honest, and I look forward to continued conversations. So thank you for inviting me to this one.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Emily?
So 2 things, I'll try to address the question about having difficult conversations. So bear with me, I'm going to say those 2 words again, people managers. You've got to, if you're a people manager, at some point in your career, you have got to get comfortable with having the tough conversations. I don't like it either. I would love just for all of us to be able to not talk about those things that are difficult, but you have got to build trust with your team. And it's hard. It's hard when you have new teams, new people are away, but you've got to work every day at it. And sometimes it means that as a people manager, you have to be vulnerable. I'm sure my team knows way too much about me and what my husband Wallace and I do here. But it's me giving them a glimpse into my world so they'll feel comfortable enough to give me a glimpse into their world when it is necessary. I tell the story about one of my managers who is a single mom of 2 kids, 2 young adult women. And she said to me, before we went on telework, the schools were already closed. She came to me and she said, look, the girls are going to be out of school. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm going to come in the office and work mornings, go home in the afternoon. Tuesday and Thursday, I am going to work afternoon. I'm going to work afternoons and stay home in the morning. She felt comfortable enough to come to me with the problem and the solution. And so I say, as employees, also be adults. Let's all be adults and be thinking about solutions as we come to our people managers with what our particular problem would be. That's a 2-way conversation. It promotes communication back and forth, and you're solving the problem together. And I think that's critical. And so that will segue into my closing comments about the way that we all have to be accountable to one another. A lot of discussion today about women who have children at home and who have household duties. But as women who are talking about these issues, we have to acknowledge that all of us don't have the same experience. And that there are women in our workplaces that are bearing the weight of the workplace because they're leaders. They're sitting around the table and they're making decisions about the business. And they have the weight of the world in making sure that the entire organization survives this particular disruption. So make sure that you understand that their experience may be different and you can't compare experiences, but there are women having different experiences and they have the same mental and emotional concerns you have, but they're not just worried about what's going on in the household and raising of the children and making sure everyone is taking care of they're worried about 400, 500 employees and making sure that they all get paychecks. So I just think as we're asking others to be more inclusive of women, we have to be more inclusive of the different experiences that women are having across the world in terms of the things that could be weighing them down emotionally and contributing to their mental issues in the workplace. And then when you talk about mental issues, I'll say this, one of our key pillars for policy has been workplace healthcare. And wellness is one of those issues. You cannot talk about, you can't not talk about wellness in the workplace. We've been talking a lot about physical wellness and telling people to go to the gym and what they eat. But look, little things, and my team has heard this, taking time to go put together a puzzle. I ordered a coloring book, a Mickey Mouse coloring book the other day with crayons as my relief. It's something I enjoyed doing as a kid. And you just gotta find your pockets of relief for you. And when you see others struggling, ask the question. They may not open up to you, but they may feel some way, and hopefully positively, that you cared enough to ask the question. And so that's what I'll end it. And thank you so much for having SHRM participate. We're really excited about being involved in this.
Thank you so much, Emily. I wanted to share with all the participants, but we will collect other questions that we didn't succeed to respond, and we will try to respond in a follow-up email with the links, everything that Sarah mentioned during her remarks, everything that Emily mentioned, all the resources we will do our best to include. Also, if you think that we have a particular topic that it deserves and you would like to elaborate, for us to elaborate more, we will be happy to adjust our schedule and to plan our future webinars accordingly. We care about our community and we are here to collaborate with you, private sector, governments, and civil society, so we can we are in this together. So we hope we will continue the collaboration. Anna, over to you, but I hope you don't mind that during your remarks, we will also take the last two polls so we can see how good we were during this hour.
Yeah, no, I think it will be very, very brief because we're over time and others are waiting. So I just wanted to give one word to the question that we heard earlier. It's empathy. I think this is the time to show empathy and to really, and I think what Emily was talking about was to really understand the realities of the team members, of your colleagues, and you can show that by showing empathy. It's the other word that I want to give is solidarity. This is also a good time for solidarity among women. We know very well our challenges, and we know how that we need flexibility in responding to those challenges. So, sorry, I hope you don't see my screens. There's a lot of things popping here. But finally, I would like to call upon those companies that are on this Zoom meeting to consider, and if you haven't done so, to consider signing up to the Women's Empowerment Principles and be part of this global community that really care about gender equality and women's empowerment. And you can find more information on our website, weps.org, weps.org. Thank you. And I'm glad to see that you are polling at the same time. Diana, thank you very much for doing that. I think this is just the beginning of our series of different webinars. So we will tackle some other issues. And as called for by Diana, we'd like to hear from you. What are the exact things that you'd like to talk about? And we'd love to hear your suggestions.
Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your participation. A special thank you to Liz, Sarah, Emily, Anna. We will share the recording and the presentation along with the resources link. Stay well and safe. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank